Just want to review a few quick halachos before we go in the parak, the new parak, Rabbi Gamliel Omer. So a few things. First of all, Yibum. Once Bia has been performed, once Yibum has been done, so the Yevama becomes the Miyabim's wife, and there are therefore no longer any further obligations upon any of the other brothers, and the other wives are now free to marry anyone who they want. However, the Yevama cannot marry any of the other brothers, and the other brothers cannot perform Bia with any of the other wives, because Kevon Bayis Echad Ubona Ve'ein Bona Beis Batim. So again, one person does Ibum, so the other wives are all usher to him, and the other wives are usher to all of the brothers. Chalitza, the same thing.
Choose. Which one must he choose?
Again, that's the whole discussion of the Masechta. But in general, once he chooses one of them for Yibum, so then all the other ones are going to be usher. With Chalitza as well, once Chalitza has been performed on one of the women, so now all the wives are going to be free to marry. However, the Yavam or any of the brothers cannot perform Bia with any of these other wives, or with the wife that one of the brothers performed Chalitza with, obviously, because Kevon Shalobana Shul Lo Yivna. Once you choose not to go ahead and take your brother's name, so you can no longer do it. Those are the two cases that, of course, we know. Mamar. So what's Maimer? Maimer is a rabbinic Kedushin. So Maimer is like Kedushin. Maimer is not effective min Torah, because mitzvah of Yibum can only be done how? Either through Yibum or Chalitza. Maimer is sort of like not here and not there. So what happens if one of the brothers does Maimer on one of the women? So Midoraisa, on a biblical level, once he does Maimer, one of the other brothers should theoretically be able to come and marry and have Bia with her, or have Bia with any of the other sister, or any of the other wives, because at the end of the day, Maimer isn't anything. As we'll see in the Gemara later today, once he does Maimer, so there's a Gzera D'Rabbanan, there's an Issa D'Rabbanan that once he does Maimer, so now all of the other wives are going to be usher to all of the brothers and to him, and he is going to be usher to all of the other wives as well. So there you go. So Maimer, even though it shouldn't theoretically work, the rabbis made a Gzera that if he does Maimer with one of the wives, so now he has some connection to that wife, all the other wives are usher to him, and all of the wives, including that wife, are usher to all of the other brothers, even though theoretically, when you think about it on a deraisa level, the Maimer shouldn't count as anything, and the brother should be able, and he himself should be able to do Bia or Chalitza with any of the women. After Maimer, let's just say for this guy who did Maimer, so after Maimer, so now the Yevama is considered his wife on a rabbinic level, and therefore he has two choices at this point. He could either do Yibum, he could actually finish it. It doesn't ruin, as we'll see. It doesn't ruin, even though theoretically he could have just done Yibum right away. He could have had Bia right away. If he does Maimer first, the rabbinic marriage, so it doesn't ruin the fact that he could still do Bia. However, if he does decide to do Chalitza, so now there's going to be a problem. Because what happens if he does Maimer? What does he have to do besides for Chalitza?
Yeah.
He has to give her a get as well, in order to remove the Maimer. So again, if he would just choose to do Bia, that would be fine. If he would just choose to do Chalitza, that would be fine. But once he does the Maimer, so now he's got two problems. Now he has the Zika, the connection that he needs to do Chalitza for, and he also has the Maimer problem now, where he needs to give a get if he chooses not to go ahead and do the Yibum. And finally, with the get, let's say there's a woman or a bunch of women who fall to the man or to the brothers, and he gives a get. So again, min ha-Torah, the get does nothing, because you only have two choices in a case like this. You have to do Yibum or Chalitza. Let's say he goes ahead and gives a get. So again, if one brother gives a get, now all of the other wives are usher to him. All of the other wives are usher to the other brothers. This wife that he did the get with, that he gave the get to, is usher to all of them. And this wife that he did the get to is usher to him as well. But what does he need to do now? What does he have to do? Chalitza. Because again, the get doesn't accomplish the Chalitza. The get, just the rabbi said, even though the get on a deraisa level shouldn't do anything, because the Maisa you have to do Yibum or Chalitza, the get, as we'll see, for Gezerah D'Rabbanan, the get will have some status. However, the Maisa he still needs to do Chalitza. Now, as opposed to the case of Maimer, where after the Maimer he has a choice whether he wants to do Yibum or he wants to just divorce her, and he can give her a get and do the Chalitza. Over here he has no choice. Once he gives the get, he's basically saying, I'm not interested. Now again, he needs to still do chalitza, but he doesn't have a choice once he gives a get to change his mind and say, okay, now I'm interested and I actually want to do the yibum. So that's a little bit of the background that we need to know for today.
The last case you just said was he was faced with either chalitza or yibum.
He's got to do chalitza or yibum. He chooses to give a get. So now, why? Why did he choose it? He chooses to give a get. So he gives the get. So now the shaila is, does the get accomplish anything? So on a deraisa level, we should say it doesn't accomplish anything. Any of the brothers can do yibum. Any of the brothers can do chalitza. But we're saying no. Since he gave the get, it does something on a rabbinic level, as we'll see. Therefore, by definition, he has no choice. Now he needs to do chalitza, and none of the other brothers can marry any of the other wives. So I want to see the Rashi's inside. That's why I took a little bit longer today. So let's take a look, because these are a lot of complicated cases. Rabbi Gamliel Omer ein get achar get v'lo maimar achar maimar v'lo beila achar beila v'lo chalitza achar chalitza v'chachamim omim yesh get achar get v'yesh maimar achar maimar v'lo achar beila v'lo achar chalitza klum. So we'll see all these cases in a second. Rabbi Gamliel and Chaim are only arguing in the first two cases. They both agree that there's no bia after bia and chalitza after chalitza. We'll see what that means. However, they argue in a case of whether there's a get achar get or not. What's the case of get achar get and maimer achar maimer? So let's see Rashi. Second Rashi. Ein get achar get. Shtei Yevamos la'adam echad. So there's Ruvain and Levi, or Ruvain and Shimon dies, and now Rachel and Leah are left. So Shtei Yevamos adam echad, me'ach echad, v'natan get lezu v'get lezu. Now Ruvain gives a get to Rachel and a get to Leah. So now we said what? The get doesn't accomplish what it needs to accomplish, and they still need to do chalitza. The question is, once you do chalitza with somebody, so now you're going to be usher to all of her krovim, all of her relatives. But if you do chalitza with one of the wives, you're not usher to all of the relatives of all of the other wives. So the question is, by giving the get to the second wife, which was totally unnecessary, because giving the get to the first wife was totally unnecessary as well, but by giving the get to the second wife, did he now make himself usher to all of her krovim? It wasn't necessary to give the get. It wasn't necessary to give the get to the first wife, but okay, in Lamaisi he's going to end up doing chalitza with the first wife after the get, because he still needs to do chalitza. But now that he did chalitza with the first wife, now that he gave the get to the second wife, does the second get do anything? If you say, like the rabbis, ein get achar get, so then what? Eino aser b'krova shniya. He's not aser in the krova shniya. Why? De'i kama ahani. Because if the first get mattered with Rachel and helped, hapaka zika detarvayu v'have kimigarish nachris, then it would be like he basically cut everything off, and now he's giving a get to a random person. V'kama lo ahani lemidchein. If the first get doesn't help, basranami lo ahani. V'hilkach lav grushasahi. So he says, ein get achar get. V'chein shnei Yevamim li'Yevama achas v'natan get lezev v'get achron eino klum v'mutar b'kovasev v'tayma k'difish. It's fine. And the Gemara is going to talk about a different case as well. But over here he says, ein get achar get. So even though the first get theoretically shouldn't be anything, but the rabbi said that it accomplishes something, but l'maisa now he does chalitza with the first one, and the fact that he gave a get to the second one to Leah doesn't mean anything, and he can still marry all of Leah's krovim. V'lo maimer achar maimer. Bein biyabam echad l'shtei Yevamos bein shnei Yevamim li'Yevama achas ha'achron eino klum lisolas harishon alav. So what does he do? So let's just keep it simple again. You have Ruvain and Shimon dies. Now you have Rachel and Leah. So Ruvain gives Rachel maimer. So what's the case when he gives it to her maimer? So really, anybody should be able to marry Rachel or Leah. But we said midirabana now, nobody can marry any of them. So now he has a choice with maimer. He did maimer. Now he could theoretically marry Rachel, or he can go ahead, give her a get, and then do chalitza. But what happens if he gives maimer to Rachel and maimer to Leah? So he says, lo maimer achar maimer, ve'ena tzrichei menu get, v'lo li'asher b'kovas hashniya. When he gives maimer to the second one, that's Keilu he did nothing, because he already started the process with the first one, so now he gave Maimer to Rachel. Ein Hanami, if he wants to marry her, he can marry her. If he wants to divorce her, he could divorce her, and then he needs to do Chalitza. But the fact that he gave Maimer to the second one, to Leah, doesn't mean anything, and therefore he can go ahead and marry Leah's relatives. And now, Velo Be'ila Achar Be'ila, what does that mean? Ba'al Zu V'chazar Ba, Hu Oechav Al Tzarasa. So now he had Bia with Rachel, and now he has Bia with Leah. What happened when he had Bia with Rachel? That was Yavam. That was Yibum. So he did Yibum with Rachel. What's the case once he has Yibum with Rachel? What's the status of Leah to him? She's usher to him. Bias nus ba'amahu ve'in usher b'kovaseh. So now when he has Bia with Leah, it's a bias nus. It's totally usher. Therefore, it's not going to accomplish anything. And if it doesn't accomplish anything, then they're not married. And therefore, even though he did a boo-boo, he did something that was usher. Lamaisa, he's still mutter if he wants to take another wife. He's married to Rachel. If he wants to marry another wife, he can marry one of Leah's relatives. Lo chalitza achar chalitza. So too, Reuven does chalitza with Rachel. So who's he also now to? He's also to all of Rachel's krovim. What happens if he gives chalitza to Leah as well? Well, once he does chalitza with Rachel, everything's gone. When he does chalitza with Leah, it's basically doing nothing. And therefore, if he wants to marry one of Leah's relatives, even though he can't marry Rachel's relatives because he did chalitza with Rachel, he can marry one of Leah's relatives because when he did chalitza with Leah, he was basically wasting his time. Now the Chachamim say yesh get achar get, v'yesh ma'amar achar ma'amar. Rashi yesh get achar get. So dekama lo dacha lagamri. He says there is a get after get because when Reuven gave Rachel a get, so it was really worthless, but it wasn't worthless totally. Hilka hakati ika palga zika dehabaya chalitza. He's saying, but lemaisa when he gave the get, everything wasn't done with because he still needed to do chalitza. Hilka chahani basav have girushas of asar b'krovaseh. So he says that since he gave the first get, but the first get there was still something missing because he still didn't do chalitza. When he gave the second get, the case wasn't closed yet. Now when he gives the second get, he still needs to do chalitza with one of them. And therefore, yesh get achar get, and therefore after he does chalitza, again, his only choice now once he gives one get, but for sure once he gives both gets is to do chalitza. Once he does the get, so now when he does chalitza, he's going to be usher to not only Rachel's relatives, but to Leah's relatives as well, because yesh get achar get, and when he gave the get to Leah, it had the effect of ushering her relatives as well. And also v'yesh mamer achar mamer, again if he does maimer with Rachel. So we said basically according to Tanakama, Rabbi Gamliel, the maimer with Leah is worthless, and it doesn't matter what happens. He can marry any of Leah's relatives. No, since when the maimer was done with Rachel, it didn't close the case yet because Lamaisa now he either needed to do yibum or he needed to give her again and do chalitza. When he does maimer with Leah too, at the end of the day, when everything is said and done, he's going to be usher to Rachel's krovim and he's going to be usher to Leah's krovim as well. Ketzad. And Rashi says, Lava plukta kaya lemilsa be'ampe nafshehi, ve'yavam echad ve'yivama achas kai. So now the question is, Ketzad din yavam ve'yivama v'hachim mefarish b'gmar. So Ketzad, what's the case? So now based on everything that we know in the background, it should be easy to understand. Asa maimer b'yivamto v'natan la get. So let's speak it outside to see if we really understand. So he does maimer with the yivama, and then he gives her a get. So does he need to do chalitza or not? He does maimer. What does maimer accomplish? What? Kedushin. But now we said he still needs to do what? Either yibum or chalitza. What happens if he gives a get after maimer? So he gets rid of the maimer, but he still has to do the chalitza. Tzricha heimenu chalitza. Rashi v'imratza lichnos lo yichnos. And he can't be kones her. Why? Dechevan dehitchil begerushin. Because once he gave her the get, Chaim alel below yivne. What's the chiddush here? That what would I have thought? I would have thought again. Shimon dies. Reuven now has a choice with Rachel. He could either do yibum or chalitza. He chooses to do maimer, and then he gives her a get. So what would I think? Maybe I would think maybe we're back to square one. The maimer came and they were married on a kedushin. They were married on a derabanan level. He comes in and gives her the get, knocks off the maimer. We're back to square one. He could either do yibum or chalitza. Saying no. Once he went through the process, which he didn't have to. Again, a lot of these cases are theoretical. Why would he ever do this? That's a good question. Why would he ever do this? But Lamaisa, once he does it, and he does the maimer, and then he does the get. So Lamaisa, you would think you're back to square one. No, you're not back to square one because once you did the get, now you've basically been saying I am no longer interested in marrying her. Because again, even after he did the maimer, he had the option to marry her. He could have done yibum with her. So we say, no, now if you want to do it, doesn't matter. Now he needs to do chalitza with her. Because again, the chalitza still was never done. Asa maimar v'chalitza. So now he did maimer and chalitza. So what's missing? He did maimer and chalitza. What's
the get?
The get. Tzvi menu get. Why? Rashi, the chalitza afkasa lezikta, because the chalitza took care of the zika. Ubai get lafkuya kedushin delay. The chalitza lo mifkar's kedushin. The chalitza again. It's an interesting. It's a chiddush, but it makes sense. That means the chalitza would have been enough. When Shimon dies, Reuven could have done chalitza with Rachel. But once he does the maimer with her, so now he's got it. So now he has two problems. Now he has a problem that he's quote unquote married to her without being married to her, and he also has a problem that he still hasn't done chalitza. So in order to get rid of the maimer, he needs a get, and the chalitza gets rid of the zika that he had in terms of the brother dying. Asa maimar ubal. What happens if he does maimer and then he has bia with her? Well, we just said harezo kimitzvasa. That's fine. He's allowed to do that. Rashi's going to say, Mefarish B'Gemara, Afzu K'mitzvah. So it doesn't mean this is the mitzvah, because we know what's the mitzvah. Is you do Yibum. You do Bia. You don't have to do Maimer. Theoretically, we're saying if he did the Maimer, it's not going to ruin the option to do Bia still, because the Maimer is like halfway. So yes, Einachanam, you could have done the whole way right away, but if you do Maimer, we're not going to ruin it, and therefore if you did Maimer, you could still have Bia with her, like we said all along. If you do Maimer, you still have the option to do Bia or to do Chalitza, but if you do Chalitza, then once you did the Maimer, you also need a get. Not on get ve'asa Maimer. So he gives her a get, and then he does the Maimer. So what did he accomplish by giving her the get? He basically said, I'm no longer interested. But now when he comes ahead and does the Maimer, what's he doing basically?
Changing his mind.
He's changing his mind and marrying her. So he can't do Yibum because he already gave her a get. But he can't just do Chalitza because now he did Maimer. So what does he need? Tzvi get v'chalitza. He needs a get to get rid of the Maimer. Again, this is all using the same svar. So once you can follow, you can follow. He needs a get to get rid of the Maimer, but he also needs a Chalitza because he never did Chalitza, Rashi. Be'ose Yevama atzma. Afilu Rabbi Gamliel moded diyesh. Remember, we're talking about one. We're back in Rashi. Afilu Rabbi Gamliel moded diyesh Maimer achar get. Even though he said ein Maimer achar Mamar, there is Maimer achar get. Why? Demisafkalei get dachi lo. We don't know whether this get accomplished or not. V'dilma get lo dachi. Maybe the get didn't do anything. V'hani Maimer, and the Maimer is going to help, etc., etc. So therefore, you got to do both. So again, if you have the get and then you did the Maimer, so the get basically said you can no longer do Yibum. Now you got to do a get for the Maimer, and you got to do Chalitza for the original Zika. Not on get ubal. So now he gave her a get. So what did he say by giving her a get? I'm no longer interested. So now what does he have to do? He needs to do Chalitza. But over here, instead of doing Chalitza, he was Baal. So what happened when he was Baal? So tzricha get v'chalitza. Rashi, aser lekaima, dekama aleh below yivne, tzricha get lebiasa v'chalitza, so v'chalitza lizikatza. What's the chiddush here? Is that I would have thought what? I would have thought that once he gives her the get, now when he does the bia is worthless. But the Gemara is saying, the Mishnah is saying no. Not on get, now he's got to do chalitza. That's why he still got to do chalitza. But for a chiddush reason, Baal, once he's Baal her, even though it doesn't count as Yibum, we're going to count it as a semi-marriage, and therefore it's tzricha get. He can't stay married to her because he already did the get, so it's not Yibum, but he still needs a get to get rid of the be'ila. Not on get v'chalatz. Now he did the get v'chalatz. So he gave her a get. So what did we say? What happens after you give the get? Well, you can no longer marry her, so what do you got to do? Chalitza. So he did exactly what you were supposed to do. Therefore what? Ein achar chalitza klum. And after the chalitza, there's nothing, and therefore it's fine. Look at Rashi. Ein lachar chalitza klum. V'avagav de chalitza psula hi. Dihava baili vumelo matzi vafilu hachi dachi legamre. Ve'en acharei klum. What? Dihadar mekadesh la b'maymer b'bia lo ba'in get. If he would do something now, again, he did the get which was worthless. But now we said once he gives the get, even though it's worthless, he can no longer marry her. So now he does the chalitza. Ein achar chalitza klum. What does this mean, Rashi? K'de Rabbi Akiva. It doesn't mean that obviously the chalitza works, but it's like Rabbi Akiva Damar ein kedushin tosin b'chayav elavin. It's like Rabbi Akiva that says once he does the chalitza, now he's asur her, even if he has bia with her, even if he marries her, it's not going to be chal, because the Maisa is asur to her right now. Okay, it gets a little bit crazier. Chalat v'asa maimer natan get ubal. But Rashi says it's O. So now he did chalitza. What happens when he does chalitza? That's it. Everything's done. So now it doesn't matter whether v'asa maimer, whether he does maimer after the chalitza, or he gives the get after the chalitza, or he's boal her after the chalitza. Let's just skip the next few words. Ein achar chalitza klum. It doesn't matter. There's nothing after the chalitza because l'maisa what? Because again, the maimer is not going to work because she's asur to him. The bia is not going to work because she's asur to him, and the get's not going to accomplish anything because he already did chalitza. So ein achar chalitza klum. What's the other case? Oh, Baal. What happens if he's Baal her? What does that mean? What does it mean if he's Baal her right away?
Married.
So they're married. It's a Yibum. Oh, Baal. So what happens after the Baal? So v'asa maimer. So if he does maimer, so what is he doing? Nothing. He's doing maimer to a woman he's already married to. What happens if he's chalatz her? Nothing. Because he's already married to. The chalitza is basically not. What happens if he's nasan get? Then they're divorced. Ein achar chalitza klum. And Rashi points out, what should the four words here be? Ein achar Bia klum. So the Gemara is going to talk about why it says ein achar chalitza klum. But at this point in the Gemara, it's basically two different cases. You have a case where he was chalatz first. Once he's chalatz, ein achar chalitza klum. Everything's off the table. He did chalitza. Basically, she's usher to him. Anything he does with her is basically worthless. If he does bia with her, it's worthless. If he gives her a get, it's worthless. If he does maimer with her, it's worthless. Ein achar chalitza klum. If he's baal her, the opposite sense, he chooses to do regular yibum, then what happens? He's married to her. So if he does maimer, it's worthless. He's already married to her. If he does chalitza, it's worthless because he's already married to her. If he gives her a get, then they're divorced because they're married and now they're divorced. So, and therefore it says ein achar bia klum. Once he has the bia, once he has a chalitza, everything else is basically worthless at that point because, as we explained, except for the get. But when we say ein achar bia klum, it just means there's nothing out of the ordinary. They're basically married, or they've done chalitza. If they've done chalitza, everything's off the table. If they're married, then bia and then chalitza and maimer are off the table. And if he gives her a get, then he gives her a get like he gives any woman a get. Okay. Turn the page. Achas yivama, achas liyavam echad. Now achas just means whether or. So the case is whether yivama achas liyavam echad, like we're talking about Ruvain to Rachel, ve'achas shtei yivamos liyavam echad, or Ruvain to Rachel and Leah. Fine. Ketzad. So now we're going to spell out the cases that I've already said outside. Ketzad, what's the case? Bishtei Yevamos liyavam echad. What's the case where you have two Yevamos? You have Rachel and Leah to Ruvain. Again, Ruvain and Shimon are brothers. Shimon dies. Now you have Rachel and Leah. So now we're going to go through the cases that we had until now with two Yevamos instead of just one Yavam. So what's the case here? Asa maimer bezu and maimer bezu. So there's two women, Rachel and Leah. Ruvain does maimer with one and maimer with the other. So what should the din be? Well, what happens if he does maimer with one? So now he has a choice. He could either marry her or he could give her a get and do chalitza. The problem is now he did maimer with the other one. Well, we have to go back to the Mishnah for a second. It depends whether we hold what? Yesh maimer acha maimer or ein maimer acha maimer. If ein maimer acha maimer, according to Rabbi Gamliel, there's nothing to talk about. He did maimer with the first one. The second maimer was nothing. He could still choose to either marry the first one or to do chalitza with the first one, but he needs to give her a get as well.
What's that simultaneously?
I'm assuming if it's done
the other makes sense, but if it's done simultaneously, then he's a double get, or he's not married at all to either.
That I don't know. I'm not sure.
It's not possible.
Why? If you have a shliach, it could be possible. Do maimer to both at the same time. But the question is, would it be chal? I don't think it would be chal, but I don't know. I'm not sure. Excellent question. Okay. Do you want me to say your name for the tape so everybody knows who you are? No? Okay. Okay, so we're going to see in a second that the Chachamim, we're going to go like the Chachamim here, because again, according to Rabbi Gamliel, there is no question. Ein ma'amar achar maimer. So there's nothing to talk about. But what happens if you say yesh maimer achar maimer? This is all going to be within the rabbis. Yesh maimer achar maimer. So the second maimer does something. So now what happens? You gave maimer to the first, and now you gave maimer to the second. So does the second maimer, which has, again, for our purposes, we said yesh maimer acha maimer, that now he's going to be usher to the second, to Leah's relatives. But what does that mean about the maimer that he did to Rachel? Does that ruin the maimer that he did to Rachel, and now he has no choice but to divorce Rachel? Or can he still go ahead and marry Rachel? So Gemara says, Ketzad, asa maimer bezu a maimer bezu, tzrichos shnei gittin vechalitza. So he needs two gittin. Why? Rashi, Kirabanan. Just keep a finger on Rashi. Kirabanan. Why? Diyesh maimer acha maimer. V'yevume lo. He can't do yevume. Why? Because what's he going to do? Now he has maimer out with two different women. Ili yevume letarvayu. If he does ibum with both, he can't. Why? Havulo shnei batim. You're not going to marry both. So that would seem to imply that if he does maimer with both, that it wouldn't be chal either. That's what it seems to imply, but I'm not sure, because again, you can't have shnei batim, you can't marry both. The question is, what would happen if would the maimer be chal on both, and would you still need two gittin by both? It's not a question that you can't marry both. The question is, would you still need two gittin by both? So now you can't marry both because it's shnei batim. V'ila chada. But for the first, even though if he never did maimer with the second one, there's nothing to talk about, and he can marry the first one, or he could give her a get and then do chalitza. But now that he has maimer out to two women, ilachada hoel v'chaverta be'agida havale bona shnei batim. Even the maimer is considered to be bona shnei batim. And therefore, so this part answers your question. In this part of Rashi, now he's saying once you do mimer with both, it's bonus shnei batim, so it would not be chal the two mimers. But over here now you have mimer with the first, and now you do mimer with the second. So now you can't do like you would do with just one. You can't just do yibum with the first one or have bia with the first one because l'maiseh you already have mimer with the second one. So now what do you need to do? You need two gittin to get rid of the two mimers. But what's the problem if you have the two mimers and the two gittin? What have you still not done? You still haven't done chalitza. Because again, the mimer was just instead. The get is to get rid of the mimer. It's not to get rid of the chalitza. You still need to do l'maiseh either yibum or chalitza. And therefore, you need shnei getin to get rid of the two mimers, and you need a chalitza Rashi la'achas mehen. Which one? Whichever one you want. Upoteret tzara. To any of them you want to get rid of the tzara. Okay, we're clear. We're getting there. We're understanding.
Yeah, but shnei batim is an isur.
Yeah, of course. You can't build two. That's why you can't marry two of the women. Or else you'd be able to marry as many of the wives as you want. It's tafka to be mekayim one bayis. You can only marry one of the women, and that's why once one person does chalitza, they're all aser.
Oh, there's two chiyuvim of yibum.
No, so we're saying he did mimer. All of this whole case over here is when he did mimer with two of Shimon's wives, Rachel and Leah. He left two wives. So now Rachel and Leah, if he does mimer with both of them, he can't marry both of them. You're only allowed to marry one of the wives, and if you do chalitza, then you're aser to all of them. So you're allowed to only marry one of the wives. So once he does mimer with two of them, he's stuck. Because if he only did mimer with one, he can marry her. And then the other ones would be usher. But once he does mimer with both, it's like he can't marry the first because he has some connection to the second. So he's left with no choice but to do both of them gets and to do chalitza. Mimer bezu, the get lezu. So now we have a different case. He does mimer with one and a get to the other one. What happens if he gives mimer to one? Well, theoretically he can marry it. But the problem is that when he gives the get to the second one, he's basically saying, what? I'm not interested. Tzricha get. So he needs a get for who? He needs a get for the first one that he did mimer from. V'chalitza, and he still needs chalitza because again, he did mimer, he did a get. So the get, the get that he's going to give now to the first one will get rid of the mimer to the first one, but he still needs chalitza because he never did chalitza. So Rashi, mimer lezu v'get lezu, pasal get shel achrona es harishona. The get of the second one is pasal the rishona, because again, if there was no second one and he did mimer with the first one, he can go ahead and marry her. The kimle below yivne, because once he said I'm not interested, he ruined the mimer that he did with the first one. Utsricha get lemamara, so now he needs a get for the first one. V'chalitza lezikaso, now he needs a chalitza with either one of them, because again, the chalitza lo mifka kedushin, v'get lo mifka zika. That's the key. Get doesn't get rid of chalitza requirements, and chalitza doesn't get rid of get requirements, or else it would just be easy, just do either or. We're saying no, get doesn't get rid of the chalitza requirements, and if you just do chalitza, once you do mimer, you need a get as well, because chalitza will not get rid of the get requirements.
You might have thought that the get to the second one would have been useless. And
right, so that's the chiddush of the Mishnah, that the get to the second one is basic, but that's only if you hold yesh get achar get, or yesh mimer achar mimer. So according to Rabbanan, the get to the second one ruins what you did with the first one, even though you would have thought that it would be worthless. And of course, right, that's what the Gemara is saying. Mimer bezu ubalazu. Wow, so now he did mimer with the first, now he did bia with the second. So theoretically, one would say that what? Who's he married to?
Second.
Maybe he's married to the second one. The problem is what? That he had done mimer to the first one first. Tzrichos beis gittin. So it's interesting. Then that's also a chiddush. That the mimer with the first one I hear, that's chal, so now he needs a get for that one. He can't marry her because he did bia with the second one. But the fact that this second bia is chal, that's a chiddush. He needs two gittin, one to get rid of the mimer and one to get rid of the bia, and he still needs chalitza. Because he hasn't done yibum, now he needs chalitza. Rashi. Mimer lezu, abal lezu. Asur lekaima. He can't marry the mamar one. Why? I'm sorry. He can't marry. He's not married to the second one that he did bia with. Even though if there was only one and he did bia, then he would be married to her. Again, because once he did mimer with the first one, so even though it didn't work, quote unquote, because mimer is only rabbinic, if we would say that the second one is chal, so then he's married to two of the women. But it's a chiddush, because now what? Even though the bia doesn't work, it's still chal enough that what? That he needs a get. Get lema'amaro v'zu, get lebiaso. Okay, so now he needs two get, but what happens after he has the two gets? He's still missing v'chalitza. V'chalitza la'achas mehen, either one, upoteret sarasa, etc., etc. So again, the cases sound a little bit crazy, but at the end of the day, once you follow the logic and you understand what you need, that the get doesn't accomplish, and only the chalitza accomplishes, that the mimer doesn't accomplish, and only the bia accomplishes, and you understand that the get needs to get rid of the mimer, and the chalitza needs to get rid of the zika, so then you can basically make all of these conclusions ourselves, and it feels really good.
How do you chalitza the second one?
What? You could do chalitza with either one.
Why the second one?
Because again, once he does the get into both of them, it's keilu they're both basically back to square one. Not back to square one in the sense that he can now marry them, because again, the get showed that he was not interested. He had to give the get, but the get basically says, I'm not interested. But now he can do chalitza with any of the women. And if there's a third wife, he could theoretically do chalitza with her as well. Because again, the chalitza is a separate entity. You have two parts here. You have the chalitza part, which he never did.
The second one he's done bia with.
What? But again, we're saying that since he did maimer with the first one, the bia was not chal in terms of yibum. It was chal that he needs a get, but it's keilu he did maimer with both of them. If he did maimer with both of them, so the bia, again, it's a chiddush. The bia I would have thought would not be chal at all. Means saying the bia is chal, quasi chal. It's chal in the sense that he's quote unquote married to her, that he needs a get from her, but it's not chal in the yibum sense that he's married to her as a yibum, because of maisa, the fact that he did maimer with the first one ruins the fact and prevents the fact from the second bia from actually going through. So once he gives gets to both of them, he needs to do chalitza with one of them. Maimer bezu v'chalatz lezu. So now he did maimer with the first one and chalitza with the second one. So what happens? Well, the chalitza now counts, but he's out there with the maimer with the first one still hanging. Harishon Tzvi get. So now he doesn't need to do another chalitza, because the chalitza takes care of everything, because again, it's two separate things, but he still needs a get to get rid of the first mimer, because he can't marry the first mimer, because he did chalitza with the second one. But lemaisa, he still needs a get for the first one. Get lezu v'get lezu.
Hold on, why can't he, if he did chalitza for the second one, why couldn't he just marry the first one?
Because once he does chalitza with the second one, it's over. Now he can't marry any of them. Yeah, okay. Well, if you do chalitza with one woman, you can't marry any of them. So once he does chalitza with the first one, so again, if he would have done bia, if he would have done again, this is the case in the Gemara. If he would have done bia with the first one and then chalitza with the second one, then the chalitza would be worthless. But the fact that he only did maimer with the first one, and now he still needs to do either bia or chalitza with her. Once he does chalitza with the second one, he's basically left with nothing with the first one. But he did bia, but he gave her maimer, so he needs a get to get rid of the maimer. Get lezu v'get lezu. Well, now he gave a get to both of them. So what happens if he gives a get to both of them? Well, he didn't accomplish anything. Tzvichos hemenu chalitza. He still needs to do chalitza, but after the chalitza, whichever one he does chalitza with, who's he going to be usher to? Not only her relatives, since he gave a get to the second one, he's going to be usher to her relatives as well. And if he would do chalitza with a third sister, which he could theoretically do with a third wife, then he'd be usher to her because of the chalitza, and because of the get, he would be usher to these relatives as well. Get lezu ubal ezu. So now he gave a get to the first one. And again, we have to be careful. Get lezu, so now once he gives a get to the first one, he's not allowed to do yibum. So now when he's baal lezu, when he's baal the second one, again, the chiddush is what? That it's not chal for the yibum, but it's chal enough that he needs a get. So now he needs a get from the second one, sricha get from the second one, but now he has basically two gets out there. What do we say? Get lezu v'get lezu. You still need chalitza to get rid of the zika. Get lezu umamar bezu. So he did a get to the first one, so now he basically said, I'm not interested. Now he does maimer to the second one. So maimer to the second one, if there was no get to the first one, you could say, okay, you did maimer, now you can marry her. But the maimer, again, is going to be chal enough that he needs sricha get. But again, now he has a get lezu, but get lezu, it's all coming out to the same thing, that he has gets out there. The gets do not accomplish what the chalitza needs to accomplish, and therefore he still needs to do chalitza. Get lezu v'chalatz lezu. He gave a get to the first one, he did chalitza with the second one. Well, we said before, maimer bezu v'chalatz lezu, so now he still needs a get for the first maimer. But when he gave a get to the first one, he did chalitza with the second one, where are we? He's basically off the hook, and that's it. However, he still can't marry what? He still can't marry either one of their relatives. Not the one he did chalitza with, not the one he gave a get to, but Lamaisa he's done now. Because the one that he gave a get to, he doesn't have to do anything further with. So get lezu v'chalatz lezu ein achar chalitza klum. Fine. Okay. Chalatz v'chalatz. He did chalitza with one, and he did chalitza with the other one. So what happens? So let's just skip a little bit. Ein achar chalitza klum. So there's no chalitza after the second one, because once he did chalitza with the first one, he's basically off the hook. When he does chalitza with the second one, so that's it. Look at Rashi, chalatz v'chalatz. Uktani seifa ein la'achar chalitza klum v'hachi perusho. Chalatz lezu v'chalatz lezu. He did chalitza with Rachel and then chalitza with Leah. So the chalitza with Leah is nothing. It's like doing nothing. It's like spitting in anybody's shoe, going to somebody in the street and saying, "Hi, excuse me, can I spit in your shoe, please?" Mutar bekrov shniya. So he can marry the krovim of Leah, because again, it's like going over to a random person in the street and spitting in their shoe. She'ein achar chalitza rishona shum zikas yevamin v'chalitza basraisa lav klumhu. Perfect. What about back in the Gemara? Keep your hand on Rashi. O chalatz the asa maimer natan get ubal. He did chalitza with one, Rashi, v'chein chalatz lezu. And after he did chalitza to this one, so basically what? Everything is off the table. Now he either does maimer lezu, or v'chein natan get lezu, or he gives a get to the second one, or he's baal lezu. What? Ein masa achron klum. He shouldn't have done bia with her. He's basically usher. It's a bila znus. But once he does chalitza with Rachel, so now the maimer to Leah is nothing. Right, all the cases before that we said that you got to get rid of that maimer, that was only before he did the chalitza. That was when he did the maimer and the maimer, or the get and the maimer, etc., etc. But once he does chalitza with the first one, everything's off the table. Again, going back to what we said before, now any bia znus is not going to be mekayim, and therefore once he does chalitza with Rachel, if he does maimer with Leah, if he gives a get to Leah, if he's baal Leah, it's basically like doing that with any woman in the street, except for the fact that if you're baal a woman in the street, theoretically you're married to her. With Leah, it's not going to be chal, and it's just be'ilah znus, and that's it. It's ki'ilu, he did nothing. Fine. Wow. Okay. O Baal, Ubaal. O Baal v'asa maimer natan get v'chalatz. We'll get to a second. Ein achar chalitza klum. And again, over here it should say ein achar be'ilah klum. So what's the case here? O Baal, Ubaal. What did he do here? He was Baal and Baal. So he was Baal Rachel. So what's the status of him and Rachel? They're married. Now he's Baal Leah. Leah's usher to him, because he only allowed to be Mekayim one bias. So what happens when he's Baal Leah? Nothing. He's over an Isser, but he's not married to her. And it's not Chal, like we said, because the Bia, as according to Rabbi Akiva, as we said in Rashi, it's not Chal, and therefore he doesn't have to do anything. He doesn't have to give her a get. He's just not married. It's like doing Bia with a random person in the street again, except a random person in the street you would be married to. But the Baal they did with Leah was Aser, but it's not going to make them married. Or he was Baal Rachel, and then he's married to Rachel, so now if he does Maimer with one of them, it's worthless. Not on get to one of them, it's worthless. If he gives a get to Rachel, then they're divorced. V'chalatz, if he does chalitza now after you already did the bia, it's worthless, because you already did what you had to do. Once you do the bia, once you do the ibam, so the chalitza is nothing. It doesn't retroactively get rid of it. Ein achar chalitza klum. The Gemara says, Bein yavam echad l'shtei yevamos. All these cases, again, we spelled them out, certain cases, but all these cases are when you have one yavam, Ruvain, with two yevamos, Rachel and Leah. It would be the same thing, bein shnei yavam and liyavama achas. All of these cases, which we didn't spell out, all of these cases would be the same if you had Ruvain and Shimon and only Rachel. We used all of the examples of Ruvain with Rachel and Leah. But it would be the same thing. Yesh get achar get, ein get achar get, yesh mamar achar mamar, ein mamar achar mamar, v'biyah. It would be the same thing if you had two brothers with the same woman. What happens if one brother gives a get and then the other gives a get? It would be the same thing as one brother giving a get to Rachel and then the brother giving this get to Leah. And whatever cases we said that the get to Leah would be nothing, that would be the same thing where the get from the second brother, Shimon, would be nothing as well. That's just what the Gemara is saying here. Fine. Chalatz ve'asa maimer. We already had this, and the Gemara is going to tell us. The Gemara tells us we're going to see this in the Gemara. So we're just going to read this part of the Mishnah, but we already had part of this part of the Mishnah. This part of chalatz ve'asa maimer, we already had this. Chalatz, if he does chalitza, so what happens? Everything's off the table. Ve'asa maimer natan gedu bal, and then he does maimer gedu bal, or if he's bal. Ve'asa maimer ve'natan get v'chalatz, and then he's maimer natan get v'chalatz. What do we say in both of these cases? Nothing. Ein achar chalitza klum, bein bechila, bein me'emsa, bein besov. It doesn't matter when you did the chalitza. V'habe'ila, but the bia bismanchi bechila ein acharei klum. If the bia comes first, then ein acharei klum, because he's married. Be'emsa besov yesh acharei klum. And again, the Gemara will discuss, if he does the bia not in the beginning, he does the bia after he already did, and we went through some of these cases, he did the bia after the maimer, or after the get, so then it makes a difference. But if he does the bia in the beginning, so then ein achanami, of course, we said he's married to her, and then everything else is basically worthless. Rabbi Menachem Omer, he argues achas be'ilah v'achas chalitza bein betchila bein be'emsa bein besof ein acharei klum. He agrees by chalitza. Whenever you do chalitza, everything's off the table. But if you do the bia even in the middle, then everything's off the table as well. And again, the Gemara will discuss that. So let's just go back now in the Gemara. We're actually not going to go all the way to the end of the DAF, but let's just understand what we started with today. I told you in the beginning of the day that what? That really mida oraisa, a get and or maimer should not work. We said that when a brother dies, you have Ruvain and Shimon. Shimon dies, and now he leaves Rachel. Let's just just keep it simple. He leaves Rachel, so now he has a choice. He either has to do Yibum or chalitza with Rachel. What happens if he does maimer with Rachel? So we said theoretically, if there's another brother, if there's Reuven, Shimon, and Levi dies, and he leaves Rachel, and now there's Reuven and Shimon. If Reuven does maimer with Rachel, so we said on a biblical level, it's nothing. And Shimon should be able to come and marry Rachel, because at the end of the day, maimer doesn't accomplish anything. You got to do either bia or chalitza. Same thing. What happens if you have Reuven, Shimon, and Levi dies, and now you have Rachel, and we said, what happens if Reuven gives a get to Rachel? So we said on a biblical level, it should do nothing. And Shimon should be able to come and marry Rachel. But midirabanan, you can't go ahead and marry. So now the Gemara is going to ask, why? What's the reason for that rabbinic prohibition that if you didn't do yibum, you didn't do chalitza, the two things you should have done, so then why is get and why is maimer going to accomplish anything? And we're going to end with this. Gemara. Ad kan lo pligi ela beget achar get umamar achar maimer. They're arguing in the Mishnah whether you say get achar get and maimer achar maimer, as we saw. Aval get echad biyevama umaimer echad biyevama mahani. But we said in the beginning that if you give a get or you do maimer, so on a rabbinic level it accomplishes something, even though on a biblical level it shouldn't accomplish anything. So the Gemara is going to say, "My taima amar rabbanan get biyevama mahani." What gave the rabbis the right to say that a get's going to help? Because again, a get shouldn't do anything. It should be that if Reuven gives a get to Rachel, it should be as if he did nothing. And therefore, if Reuven now wants to marry Rachel, or if Shimon wants to marry Rachel, or do chalitza or whatever, it should accomplish. Because again, a get's nothing. But yeah, we said midirabanan. The whole discussion we had now in the Mishnah, midirabanan, the get's going to accomplish something. So why does a get accomplish something? So Gemara is a very interesting svara. Mishum demahani ba'alma. Because a get usually helps in the world. When you have two people that are married, a get is going to do a divorce. Because if you say that a get, you're right, on a biblical level, doesn't do anything, and we're not even going to make it do anything on a rabbinic level, because say you need either yibum or chalitza, people are going to get confused. Abri get lahotzia v'chalitza lahotzia. People are basically going to get rid of all of yibum. Why? Because they're going to say, what does a get do in general? It breaks up marriages. What does chalitza do in general? It breaks up the zika. If we don't let a get work, at least rabbinically here, then what? Chalitza lo mahani. Then they're going to say, no, we're wrong, we must have misunderstood. Chalitza doesn't do anything either. V'asi limi ba'al achar chalitza. They're going to do chalitza, and then they're going to say, wait, chalitza doesn't do anything, and you can actually have bia. It seems like a far-fetched svara, but it's basically saying that we needed to have get do something. We couldn't accomplish something on a deraisa level, because we said either yibum or chalitza. But on a rabbinic level, we had get basically preclude her from marrying anybody else. Because of the fact, and only because of the fact that if we didn't let get do anything, then people are going to start making conclusions. Get doesn't work here by yibum. That means that there shouldn't be an option of chalitza either, and he should have to do yibum. And if not, then I don't know. Umay taima amar rabbanan maimer biyevama mahani. So now, what's the same svara? And we'll end with this. What's the svara that maimer should work? Again, we said either yibum or chalitza. If you do maimer, it shouldn't do anything. You should be able to marry her, or one of the brothers should be able to marry her. You should be able to do chalitza. What's pshat here? Mishum de mahani b'alma, because maimer in general accomplishes kedushin. The amar lo mahani. If you say that maimer here does nothing when he does maimer to Rachel, when Reuven does maimer to Rachel, amri maimer liknot or bia liknot. Then the opposite. You say maimer usually is kona and bia is usually kona. Umi de amar lo mahani. If maimer is not going to work here, at least on a rabbinic level, then what? Bia nami lo mahanya. Now you're going to be saying you can't even do bia. So you'll have bia with her, and you say that doesn't accomplish anything. He didn't marry her, and you're going to end up being meval achar bia. So it's interesting. So basically, what they're saying is that if they didn't make a rabbinic zera for get, and they didn't make a rabbinic zera for maimer to work in these cases, as we spoke about today, so then basically all of yibum would go down the drain, because people would say, you can't use get here, then you can't use chalitza either. And if you say you can't use maimer here, then you can't use bia either. So therefore, that's the reason for the rabbinic thing that we said today. That even though theoretically Reuven should have to do yibum or chalitza with Rachel, at the end of the day, if he does either a get or he does maimer, if he does a get, so now all the brothers are usher to do anything with her, and he's also usher to marry her now, and now he still needs to do chalitza. And also if he does maimer with her, so now all the other brothers are usher to her, and all the brothers are usher to all the other wives, and now that he does maimer, now he has a choice. Either he can now go ahead and do the full fajibum, or he can go ahead and do chalitza, but if he does chalitza, he needs to also give her a get. Shkayach.